Okay, good evening, everyone. We are going to be starting our committee of the whole meeting. I'm going to be calling our meeting to order at 6:30 p.m. And before we begin, I would like to provide just a few friendly reminders. One is that, actually a couple of housekeeping things before I get to this. One is that Councillor Mink is going to be joining us virtually for this portion of our meetings today. So she is online. And secondly, Councillor Todd is maybe standing at some points during tonight's meeting due to some excruciating back pain. So don't be alarmed if he suddenly stands up. It's not in protest. It's just because of pain. A few other reminders. Assisted living listening devices are available for anyone who may need one during tonight's meetings. Please see the deputy clerk who can help you to sign one out and get set up. And we kindly, of course, ask that you return those devices at the end of the meeting so that they can be collected and used for future use. Please also note that the washrooms are located down the hall to the left. And in case of an emergency, residents are asked to exit in an orderly fashion using the stairs located outside of council chambers. And should the staircase become unavailable, residents are asked to proceed down the fire escape located at the back of council chambers. And if any assistance is required, please see staff. We're going to start this evening with a moment of silent reflection. Thank you. Moving on to our land acknowledgement. The municipality of Port Hope exists on the lands of the Mississauga Anishinaabeg traditional territory covered by the Williams Treaties. We honor and recognize First Peoples as rights holders and stewards of the lands and waters on which we have the privilege to live, work, and play, including the Ganaraska Forest and River. We pay respect to elders, past, present, and emerging. We commit to actions towards truth and reconciliation by recognizing the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, strengthening ties with First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, especially those who make their home in Port Hope, and learning from Indigenous ways of knowing and being. We do so by recognizing the past and working towards a shared future. Moving around the table, I'm just going to ask if anybody has any pecuniary interest going into this evening's meeting. None were received ahead of time, so we do not have any. And now we're going to move on quickly through a number of different correspondence items, starting with 3.1, West Northumberland Independent regarding new weekly community newspaper coming September 3rd, which is a really exciting development in the community. I'm going to turn it over to Councillor Clare.
Nothing really to add, just that it's a really exciting development, and I wasn't sure how broadly that information had circulated, so I wanted just to include it on the agenda for an FYI for our residents.
Thank you for bringing that forward, and also for those of you who are interested, there's lots of ways to get involved through sponsorship and advertising and contributions, so I think it's important that we all find a way to ensure that this paper is successful, because goodness knows we do need good media in the community. So the recommended motion is to receive this for information. Can I get a mover and seconder for that? Moved by Councillor Clare, seconded by Councillor Darrell. All in favor? And that is passed. I'm just having a hard time. Oh, there we go. Yes, thank you. We've got Councillor Mink on that. Thank you. And that is passed. Moving on to 3.2, Greenwood Coalition regarding request to use municipal land on Shooter Street for a community food garden, and back to Councillor Clare for this.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I elevated this correspondence, which came both to council but also to myself in my capacity as chair of the Environmental Advisory Committee. So you'll notice on the agenda there is this, the next item is actually a memo of correspondence from the committee who reviewed the request and has also endorsed that through resolution. So I did want to mention that because we won't get to that until after this item. But essentially, we've been asked by Greenwood Coalition to consider allowing them use of an vacant municipal property on Shooter Street for the purpose of a community garden. You know, this, it does align very closely with our Community Climate Action Plan. It is actually one of the recommendations around urban food production and local food systems and partnerships with community. So I think it's a great idea. Obviously, staff are going to have to take a look at the specifics of that. So my intention in raising it was to bring forward a motion rather than receiving for information. I do have some motion language that acknowledges it as being aligned with the Community Climate Action Plan and refers it the request to staff for consideration of feasibility.
Do you have that? Oh, there it is. Okay. Okay, we're all going to have a quick read of this. Okay, everyone's had a chance to read this. Is there a seconder for this motion? Councillor Darrell, any further conversation on this point? All in favor? And that is passed. Thank you for bringing that forward. And this next item is just going to be housekeeping. It's on the same topic, the memorandum from the Environmental Advisory Committee regarding the support for the request to use municipal land on Shooter Street for a community garden. So I'm going to just move with the motion that's on the agenda and ask for a mover and seconder for us to receive this for information. Moved by Councillor Clare, seconded by Councillor Darrell. All in favor? And that is passed as well. Moving on to item 3.4, Memorandum 2026-03 from the Heritage Port Hope Advisory Committee regarding a request to amend the existing heritage designation bylaw number 3054. And I'm going to turn it over to Councillor Todd to introduce the motion.
Perfect, thank
And the
you.
matter.
Yeah.
The matter and the motion, probably.
About the matter of the motion. In this case, the Heritage Advisory Committee has done research on the buildings that are at the cemetery out on Toronto Road. We already have a designation of one of the buildings out there that was put through in a bylaw in 1990. There are two other buildings. So the chapel has already been designated, but we also have the caretaker's cottage and the what they call the dead house that are also heritage buildings to be designated. The easiest way of doing that would be to amend the existing bylaw. So I do have some language around that, if we can bring that up.
And just like with the previous matter, we'll give everybody a moment to read this and consider this motion. Okay, everyone's read this. Can I get a seconder on this? The Deputy Mayor is seconding. Any further questions or comments on this matter? All in favor? And that is passed. Thank you for bringing that forward. Moving on to item number 4, items for consideration, and we go to the first presentation of the evening by Daryl Goodall, Gillian Smith-Clark and Ian McCormick, Port Hope Racquet Club, and report PRC 0926, Port Hope Racquet Club Dome Project contribution. So I'm going to ask the presenter or the presenters to approach the podium and start their presentation. Thank you for being here.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having us. This is following up from a presentation a little over a year ago that Gillian presented to the group. Lots of stuff going on with the dome, and for those that were down at the groundbreaking on April 30th, thanks for attending. So Raise the Dome, a few key updates in regards to the status of the construction. So it's well underway for the ones that haven't been down to the Port Hope Rec Center. During the initial dig up of the site, we came across some unstable soil for what they call the gray beam, the foundation aspect of the required for the dome. This unstable soil wasn't identified during the initial boreholes done by Cambian way back when, but once we got back in there, it requires us to actually go a meter to meter 0.2 of extra excavation, which was then backfilled by lean cement to provide the stable footing for the foundation. What that did for the project, it added approximately $120,000 in additional cost that was unexpected for the project. So currently our project's estimated to be 1.42 million is what we have running with right now. The one risk that we do have that may add to that number slightly is the unstable fuel situation in regards to pricing. When the original project was completed, it was before the outbreak in the Middle East and lower fuel prices. We haven't seen any bills there yet, but it is a risk flagged that both for trucking and the cost of asphalt. And we have not seen anything there, but that is definitely a risk, but we'll work through that as any project from that end. Originally on the project, we had a community fundraising goal of $500,000 based off our original. With these changes, also this ate up some of our contingency, but we still have a modest contingency left. We're looking at raising that fundraising objective somewhere between 550 and 600. We haven't finalized that number yet because we only want to change our goal once from that end. So we'll do that here within the next 30 days, but there will be a recognition that, hey, we need to raise more funds for the dome itself. So that's the direct update on the dome and the construction piece. I wanted also to provide to the group with the dome, we don't have our courts here for the summer that we normally use as a club and as a community. We have been able to secure courts, partnership with TCS here locally. So once the students go back home for the summer, we have access just with the club, with our relationship to use their courts to provide programming. Also during the time outside, so we're actually playing right now, we've been able to secure local courts within the broader community to run programming. Surprisingly, our membership has actually doubled this year versus the previous year. I think the news of the dome and the excitement of the project has definitely brought out tennis players more active into the community piece here. The last piece I would like to share with the group here is once we're completed the construction is what are we doing? First, right now we're in the process of looking for corporate sponsors to support our Court Forward Youth Mental Health and Community Tennis Initiative for our less fortunate children and broader community. We'll be working with Rebound, the Youth Hub, the YMCA, local schools to run this program. So we're, as part of the fundraising and element, we'll be reaching out to corporate donors to support that particular program. You'll see towards the end of June, early July, we're actually going to start our membership drive for the winter programming here. To recognize also here, this will be a hub locally in regards to bringing tennis players, not just from Port Hope and Northumberland, but it'll actually be broader than that, bringing people into the community from the Kawarthas, Quinte and that, and the local clubs outside of Port Hope are excited to have this year-round facility on there. To give an aspect, a membership type capacity of this with the dome is about 400 members, and currently we're about 100 members to give you an aspect of what we need to have a healthy facility there. In regards to other, the summer camp will be back next year. Unfortunately, we weren't able to run the summer camp this year. We've been running, or will be running Saturday day camps for the youth in the community. Next year, we'll be back to running the 5-day camp with the municipality. Also, just wanted to quickly touch on, in regards to programming, during the winter season, the community will have access to the courts. They'll be paid time and they'll be able to sign up to use the courts as a non-member from that end. During the summer, there will be set-aside hours for the community to actually use the courts for free from that end, if they choose not to be a membership or anything of that nature. So those are things that are in play. Next summer's programming is a little way off from a detailing standpoint, but those are our plans there. So in the staff report and that, working with staff, which has been great through this project, really appreciate their support and partnership in the project here. The club here, we've respectfully asked the municipality of Port Elton consider to make a contribution of $200,000 towards our project, which represents approximately 15% of the total project on what will be a municipal asset or building upon a municipal asset. Just as information, as we're working through our initial plans with Tennis Canada as one of our key partners, they have shared it is very common for local municipalities to be part of the financial solution to bring indoor all-year tennis to the communities. That's it from the formal presentation. Love to open the floor for questions, clarifications.
Thank you. Well, I have to say, for the first part of the presentation, I was weirdly comforted by your experience, because this is the experience we often have with projects in the municipality. And it's a hard thing to sometimes relay to the public, how costs increase or things that you didn't anticipate, how those come up, and all of a sudden something that was supposed to cost one thing grows to another amount. But thank you very much for coming forward and giving us an update on this. I do have just a couple of quick questions for you to begin with. Given your ask, I'm wondering, can you give us very specific information about what hours are going to be available to the public in the summer months? Yeah. And given that you're asking us to support the project by 15% of the overall costs, are the fees that you're going to be charging in the winter months, are they basically reduced by 15% of what would be normally charged to reflect the public support from the municipality for the project?
Okay. So in regards to the public access for the summer months and that visibility, it's going to be a minimum 20 hours through those programs that we've laid out. There's going to be lots of free access through those particular programs because we have the Tennis Canada ask from that in. I expect that we'll have more hours available, but at least 20 court hours per week. For sure, that would be available during the summer at no cost, working within the programming right now. But to me, that's a minimum. That's not the cap. I expect we'll learn through this process every season that we go through what's available, and that'll be the free time. Public will still be able to access paid time, and the summer costs are much reduced for members and public versus the wintertime costs. In regards to the 200,000, our original business plan from that in, it won't directly reduce the costs. Where it indirectly reduced it, and for short-on funding, we would borrow the money and actually increase the cost because we would have a loan and debt to pay back to service, and that would be our contingency on there. But the aspect that 200,000 comes in indirectly supports keeping the fees down where we anticipated them to be on that piece.
And you understand where the question is coming from, because even though I understand that it is a small part of the overall budget, the public is going to want to know, are we indirectly supporting something that is more of a private entity than a public entity for the municipality? So that's why I was asking you if you could make that direct correlation around if the municipality was not providing that support, would those costs to the general public be higher, or is that allowing some kind of
so if those dollars didn't come in, the cost for everyone would be higher. It'd be higher for the members, it'd be higher for the general public in regards to getting that. We would lean heavily on the members because that's how we access those from that end. So it would impact the entire business model, to be perfectly frank, that, hey, we need to...
and I appreciate that, but I'm trying to get at the distinction between what your private members would be paying versus what the public would be paying in the winter months.
Okay, so that aspect, the public will be a very small percentage of covering that 200,000 if you think about that impact of a negative impact, because most of the revenue base will be members and paid members. That free time or reduced available time is just a modest portion of the revenue stream come in. So there's not the intention to say, hey, we got to get $200,000. We're going to keep the member fees the same and put it all on the public. No, it's going to be layered on, I would say, equally from a distribution standpoint, that if it's 80% members, then at least 80% members would be impacted by that, and then the public would get 20, their pro rata share, if I'm answering your question correctly, that it's.
And I appreciate that,
Yeah.
but the flip side of that is who's getting more access to the time, and is that proportionate to that division that you've just talked about?
Yeah, because of the way the numbers, whoever's using the courts are going to be the ones on the proportion to the time piece. The dollars are going to line up well with that usage piece. That the dollars are not going to.
I'm going to
Yeah, because I think the aspect, at least on the public side and public access, that this hasn't really changed what we were anticipating to charge the members. Let's talk about the incremental costs. The incremental cost aspect of what we were planning to charge the public based off, hey, we've got more dollars or we have a loan to pay off. We've been focused on, hey, we need to do a capital assessment towards the members to pay off that loan, because the access for everyone else is going to be very minor. The aspect was looking at, if we had to borrow that money, would be, hey, we're going to charge the members a capital assessment fee or fundraising shortfall fee, and that would service the debt.
I have a feeling that Councillor Clare wants to continue this
Yeah.
conversation, so I'm going to turn it over to you, Councillor Clare.
Yeah, I would like to pick up on this. I think I'm struggling with this request a little bit and along similar lines. So essentially, by putting up the dome, what I'm coming to understand through the report we're looking at today is, in fact, public use of tennis courts at Town Park is actually being reduced. And I can tell you it's being reduced because I've used those courts for free in the winter with my kids. We're not avid tennis players. We're casual. We drop in, we bring our rackets. If there's courts available, we use them. If there's not, we don't. And that's sort of throughout the year. So this is, to me, is new information, the notion that we would no longer have free access throughout the year. In fact, public use is already being reduced by nature of the business model. And at the same time, we're now being asked to contribute public money from a fund that is called the Community Benefit Fund to a project that is actually reducing community benefit from the perspective of equitable access and benefit to the community as a whole. And I'm struggling a little bit with that. And I think if I'm picking up what the mayor was sort of putting down there, is sort of looking at how does that rebalance the model to reflect that the community is making a greater contribution. To me, that should result in some shift in how the community is able to access and use that. And I also admit, when I read the proposal, I think talking about the municipal contribution as being 15%, I don't think fully captures it, because it is municipal land, right? And I think when you look at the lease agreement that is being proposed, that is, we are subsidizing the tennis dome and those tennis courts significantly, because you would have to pay way more than that if you were to purchase land to be able to accommodate the facility. So in fact, I do think the municipality's contribution is already greater than what is necessarily being reflected in the purely financial numbers. So I'm struggling with that public access piece. I'd also like, I think, perhaps more detail around what those fees are going to be. Mm-hmm. We have lots of municipal recreational facilities that are not accessible for free, right? That people pay to use them. But when they are municipally owned and operated, we are in control of what is a realistic and feasible and affordable fee to charge. And we also have subsidy programs, and we also have seniors rates and youth rates. And we have the flexibility to ensure that those are not cost prohibitive. In this case, I'm not sure what those fees are, and I'm conscious that we don't really have the authority to influence what those fees are to make sure that it will be usable by the public.
Okay. So I would say there's probably a couple aspects they're looking at. One, I think the access of those courts For us, there's definitely a difference between the winter season and the summer season, both for usage and attracting people. We have not spent time working with the town on focusing on what is the correct fee structure for that summer period, that, to your point, time that's always been there. How do we make sure that, so to me, that's a to-do and something to be addressed for sure. I think the winter piece, which the courts, the nets usually come down, call it early October, and they're up early May from that. And then I think there's a few of us that like to hit when it's really cold or really early, regardless of the time the nets from that piece. But I think in regards to that, we haven't, as a club, and I'll be perfectly working with the municipality, with the staff to say, what is that rate structure for that public access? For us as a club, we said, hey, there's going to be free time for sure in the summer. The demand on the dome will be substantially less in the summer than the winter. That's just the nature of the dome and that aspect. And we expect all those players that are coming in to experience court playing during the winter will actually go back to their home clubs during the summer period, which will, free up tons of hours available to work the programming right on there. And I think, to your point, I think for sure we've been so focused as a club, excuse me, on the construction, getting this project together, getting it up, and saying, okay, we've got the winter programming coming. Hey, the summer, what do we need? We got to replace the summer camps. How do we get the access? We know there's going to be free. Are those details? They're not nailed. But I think in regards to, hey, we're going to be open as a club, working. To your point, it is a municipal, as an organization, we're all working together to put this asset in place that's going to be better. So I would look at that and say it's an opportunity for us that, hey, it needs to be done in regards to making sure that all parties, this is a relationship between three parties, between our third-party operator, the municipality, and the club, and we realize that there's a balancing that needs to ensure that it can work well for everyone. And hey, I hear you in regards to that piece and willing to work with Julie and the team to find that right balance.
I'm going to move on to Councillor Mink and then to Councillor Less. Councillor Mink.
Yeah, thank you. I guess I have a question for staff. And a little torn because I understand what the mayor and Councillor Clare is saying about the community having access to these courts. Now that we put a dome over it, it really limits those off hours and those individuals that just kind of want to go and tinker around. They're not serious players. But when I look around at courts in the public, I often see them unused. Often they're sitting empty. And there's also a public shift now to pickleball that's becoming much more popular, and people are using tennis courts now for pickleball. So my question to staff, before we go too far down this road of the public needing access, how often are outdoor courts used by the random public? Because I don't see them used often. Do we have that data?
So thank you, Councillor Mink, through the chair. So data of that nature isn't something that we track at this point in time, in the sense of, the open passive opportunity for courts, very similar to playgrounds, very similar to trails or conversations that, we've identified through an opportunity to work through that, but being very detailed and intentional. Usually it's case by case, location by location, and making some assumptions in the broader community. So that wouldn't be data that we have available. We can identify, like, anecdotally, we are investing in the Welcome tennis court as well for some additional long-term need from that perspective. We also are proceeding with the Rapley basketball court and multi-purpose sport court that potentially will have like a community availability for the pick up and play example. So the matter from a staff perspective is continuing to work with the club and balancing that in the sense that I can't give you the data, but it is, the Leisure Services Master Plan identified, 49% of respondents of the survey at that time indicated the investment in courts was an area of high priority for them. So we know that the community is interested. It's a matter of balancing the number of courts available. So I would suggest with addition of a fourth court at Town Park Recreation Center, inclusive of the Dome, plus Rapley, plus Welcome, we're well situated with court per population. And essentially Rapley and Welcome could pick up and play what you've described, Councillor Clare, for that perspective. I also want to highlight the conversations relating to the courts being subsidized by the municipality. They always have been related to, we have an agreement with the club for the identified times. They were very specific times. We do work with members of the public who had differing opinions if they were the right time or not. So it's a balance, and from a staff perspective, I think we've done some really good work with the club by identifying that, where essentially if you look at it, 3 courts might not be available at one time, but 1 court might be available all day. So it's a matter, there's the social impacts, staff totally understand that, where sometimes, the pick up and play as a group and you're using 2 courts. We're working with the club to have an understanding of, again, in the summer season, if the court is not booked within a 24-hour period, maybe then it is just available for that pick up and play. So there's a lot of work going into those conversations, but I did want to highlight from a subsidized perspective, that is true. It's a true statement, and it has always been true. So I just want to be cautious of that.
Thank you for that. And Councillor Less.
Sorry we gave you unstable ground.
Thank you. I don't want to go into the history or what I understand the history.
You would have been in great shape had this not occurred.
And there's been a few, it's like any project in the mayor's
Yeah,
point.
and so
You get
we
some
won't dwell on that.
surprises along the way, and that's just the nature of it.
Who handles operating and maintenance costs?
So that will be ourselves through our third party. So there's no, from the operating, the ongoing maintenance is all the court through our partner, through the Supreme Court, who will be running the Dome.
Okay, and your contributions, when you say you've fundraised 300,000 or so, and you're going to 550 or 6,
Yeah.
is that through the fees you're charging your members?
No,
Or
at
is
this
it
point in
outside
time, this
that?
has been pure. So there's been donors, retired tennis players, current tennis players, number of corporate donors. There are some national branded donors in there so far that are doing that. And we're having other conversations with the local business community here to, once again, get us up to that 600,000. And obviously, this would be a big piece of that. We still need to do more, but it's been a very community-based fundraising. We've had people that have left this community that used to be active within the club make a contribution from that end. So the support's been really good from that end. You always like to be at your target right away when you're doing a fundraising objective, but
Right.
it's been
So
very broad.
if we entered into a lease agreement, would you be able to afford to pay back the lease?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Like if you think about the labor costs and the utility, absolutely, there's no issue with that.
Okay, thank you.
Just looking over this way because, yeah, okay. Councillor Todd.
Thank you. So you are looking at this as an interest-free loan, not an investment in it. Like, are we owning a portion of this, or is this sort of a borrowing?
So from did you want to address that one, Julia? I want you to get the words right.
Yeah,
I might be
no,
off just a
that's
bit.
good. So again, working from a finance standpoint and asset management perspective, the staff report is intended to identify that the $200,000 contribution would essentially be the value of the court repair and replacement if we were to be undertaking that as a project. Essentially, that will be gifted to the municipality, but we have asset management requirements to account for that information. So the courts, the structure, the structure, I don't want to confuse that with the dome. The court and the surface, the nets would all continue to be municipal assets, and we would recognize that as a gift the accounting components will be maintained as municipal asset.
So does that mean the maintenance of those assets belongs to us as we go through? Is that how that'll continue to work?
So through the discussions from the development of a lease agreement, the operations, we intend that the maintenance of those courts would then fall to the club during the operation of the dome. If the dome were no longer to exist, the lease agreement wouldn't exist, and then the maintenance components are again reverted back to the municipality.
And so what happens to the asset at the end of the 20-year lease?
We have potential to renegotiate a
Ideally,
lease.
yeah.
We have a first right of refusal clause if there were to be operational impacts or changes. So it depends on where we're at that point in time and the life cycle of the dome as well.
Okay, and the same thing on the recuperation, like, right now, we're looking at possibly $10,000 over 20 years, which would get back, $200,000. But in the event that one of the parties terminates the lease early, what would happen?
We would negotiate at that point in time if we were to seek another service provider, if it would be then reverted as a municipal asset and what the impacts are at that point.
Any other questions or comments around the table? Councillor Clare.
Yeah, I have, a question about the implications of this for other things. So you're kind of off the hook for this one.
Okay, thank you.
More
For now.
More for staff on this one. So, we just passed a motion earlier today about another group that wants to use municipal property for an asset that they want to develop and run and operate. So, these situations do arise, and I'm curious about staff's thinking around what does it look like in the future? We're not necessarily involved in the design plans. We weren't the ones doing the geotechnical studies. And so we didn't have our fingers in the pot, really, in terms of how we got to where we are now. But it is municipal property. We are involved. And the notion that if something doesn't go according to plan or there's not enough contingency built in, that the ask then comes back to the municipality. And maybe this is a special circumstance, but I'm wondering about what our thoughts are around that as a precedent that we could then come up against, with other future projects, or is that going to cause us to be wary of entering into these kinds of partnerships, which is not an outcome that I would relish. And then on the other precedent issue is the proposed use of the Community Benefit Fund. So we haven't even really talked about that fund. It's new. We haven't had a public conversation about that. We haven't established any sort of policy guardrails around what constitutes community benefit and how do we determine the use of that fund. So I'm just, not necessarily to say that it's the wrong approach, but I'm just considering, I don't want to get into a practice of this being just like a slush fund that we go to whenever we have something that we didn't, we weren't expecting, and sort of how are we going to navigate that moving forward beyond just this particular ask?
And I would just want to, that was going to be my last line of questioning around this is exactly around, whether we should be looking at a number of projects at the same time when we're contemplating the use of this kind of money so that we can better understand what are all of the decisions that we're making and what are the trade-offs of all the decisions that we're making so that we don't wind up using significant portions of those monies and then have something else that comes up later. Not to say that this isn't extraordinarily important, but there are so many extraordinarily important competing demands in our municipality and in our community. Councillor Lass.
Are we allowed to make this decision, that being in lame duck? I mean, this is something that continues on.
Through your chair to Councillor Less, we're not in lame duck at this point in time, no. August 21st would be lame duck.
So I see Councillor Killer looking at me.
The CAO, I think, also wanted
sorry.
to, yeah, I'll go to, okay, I just saw your light first, and then I'd like to hear from both of you on this.
Sure. So, thank you through you, Chair. I think the broader discussion is, what opportunities for using this community benefit fund? It will be exhausted. We don't want to exhaust it. We're trying to use it prudently. But I do understand, though, there will be some savings on the maintenance side that do offset this, right, to some degree. So the operating costs will be saved. I'm not sure if to the extent, full extent almost. So I think it's a net zero in this case. But to your point, are there other opportunities coming forward that we prudently need to use our due diligence on that community benefit? I'm not aware of any other projects or asks at this point in time coming forward that we would have a more fulsome conversation on it. I think this one's a little bit specialized because there is a huge community benefit piece to it, and there are savings or cost neutrality to it. So that would be my position.
So thank you for those comments through you as the chair. I agree related to the factor that there are minimal operational costs that the municipality will experience through the duration of the term of this lease. Essentially, no operating costs, which is a little bit different. If we look at the lease payment identified in the staff report as $10,000, is generalized comparators. This is a very unique situation as far as the municipality kind of being the landowner, the asset owner, and the club being management of the project. We recognize that. We have had discussions with council on that since the beginning of this project. So identifying that there is essentially no operating impacts on an annual basis. And then recognizing that previous agreements with the Racket Club, they actually gave contribution of membership, went to a reserve for the long-term maintenance of the courts, which again was still very much subsidized by the municipality over the course of time. So it is, in my opinion, a net benefit to the municipality as far as that lease payment. And then recognizing the contribution to the project, that if the dome weren't to have proceeded this year, we would be having the conversation about the courts needing repair. So that's why we've identified that contribution being separate from the payment, from a repayment essentially by the lease. And then to address the question kind of the partnership setting precedents, I believe from a staff standpoint that this is a unique perspective in that the club gave contribution to the fundraising drive for the redevelopment of Town Park, which included the development of the courts. So they've been invested from this in this specific site since 2002. So now we're identifying that it's a different operations, a different operating model. There's still community benefit for the use of that space. It's just in a little bit of a different way. And staff are committed to continuing to having that conversation with the club. And from my perspective, staff are continue to highlight, the club team will probably roll their eyes, but every time we talk, it's about the importance of community access to that space. So it's in the forefront of our minds, it is in the club, and it is in the service provider as well. So I do think this is unique from a partnership standpoint because we have the precedence of almost 25 years of a lease agreement and the involvement with the club.
Yes, please.
One of the mandates of the club is to grow the game of tennis, and it's not to limit. So from an aspect, just from a mission aspect, getting the kids out, getting the broader community out, it's in our best interest to get everyone in the dome and using it whenever they can from that end. So it's not trying to create a country club where we want the moms and the kids out. We want families out and stuff of that nature. It's not, okay, let's just create 10 future professional tennis players. That is not our mandate.
Although if we had that, maybe they would become, assets for the municipality of
Yes.
Absolutely. Having said that, we've got a recommended motion that's on the agenda this evening. Does somebody want to move and second this? Councillor Less is going to move the recommended motion. Can I get a? Yeah. So I guess the question is, does the mover and seconder want to put in? You're going to do the friendly amendment and put in the information, yes. Looking at you, Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, absolutely. So as long as it's okay with Les, I would recommend option, I believe it was 1, which has a 0 term for the first 2 years, and then it kicks in the 10,000 after that. So that would be the motion, as long as that's okay with Les.
Can you provide an explanation just for your rationale for that?
Absolutely. So, so the way that I see it, it gives the Racket Club, who is already doing significant amount of fundraising, it gives them an opportunity to continue to fundraise for the next couple of years, and then start kicking into the repayment, or sorry, not the repayment, the lease agreement on that. So it gives them a little bit of an opportunity to, because they are making a significant contribution to the municipality and doing a significant amount of fundraising. So it will give them a little bit of time to get this over the line. As we all know what it's like to fundraise, it's not easy to continue on that day after day. So that would be the rationale.
Councillor Les is the mover. Are you comfortable with that? Okay, so we have a mover and seconder for the recommended motion and option 1. Any further questions or discussions? Councillor Todd.
So under this option, we would recuperate 180,000 versus 200,000, which would be on option 3. Why would you, I appreciate your answer on why we would defer some of this, but why give up the other 20,000?
I think there's always an option to continue that on. That is the 20-year lease agreement, and then there would be an option to continue on with the next lease agreement that could continue with that extra 10,000 for the first 2 years and then renegotiate. Again, this is more, and we could always change it to back end it to increase it by the extra a little bit for the last couple of years. But I believe that this makes it very easy. It also makes it very consistent for them so that they know what their bill is going to be month after month. And then it's more of an option for, I guess, a future council to negotiate in if they want to continue that on with the same type of agreement, or maybe make some changes at that time, because finances are going to be different at that time too, based off of the last 20 years. So
We could just make it a 22-year lease.
Is this something that's important to you, Councillor Todd? Are you just wanting to have a discussion on it? Okay. Anyone else around the table want to ask any questions or make any comments on this? Okay, so we have the recommended motion. We have a mover and seconder. All in favor? And that is passed. Thank you. Okay, moving on to 4.2, presentation by Jeremy Deitch, Manager Municipal Assets and GIS and Report, FIT 0826, Strategic Asset Management Policy and Annual Asset Management Update. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. It's always lovely to come see you guys. Today, I'm going to spend some time discussing our asset management update to Council, as well as discussing some of the changes we're proposing for the strategic asset management policy. We're going to go through some slides that are relatively familiar for all of us that are involved in asset management planning within the municipality, and we're going to go through some new slides that kind of give us an understanding of where we're at within our asset management maturity, and some scoring metrics that provide us with a framework for how we can keep track of our asset management journey along the way as we continue moving forward. So for all of you that have attended budget meetings in the past, this should be a fairly familiar slide. I'll take everyone through it just to ensure we're all on the same page here. The gray area at the top of the chart represents our total asset management requirement for capital. The blue bars at the bottom represent our annual capital investment year over year, with the orange bar representing the average annual increase to inflation during that time. The bars at the bottom represent the funded percentage of our asset management plan as well as the point change for that percentage increase. As a reminder, the funded percentage is calculated based on the average annual reinvestment into capital over the average annual requirement. So essentially, it's the percentage that the blue bar is of the total gray area at the top. Throughout the course of 2026, the municipality reinvested an additional $889,000 over the previous year's investment, representing an overall increase of 5.5% to our funded percentage. I do want to point out, and it's not showing up very well on the screens here today, but that blue area at the bottom, the last 4 years, represents the increase in asset management funding during this current term of council. I want to point that out because it is a significant improvement over where we started in 2022 or 2023, moving our funded percentage of our asset management plans from 26.7% to this year, where it would be 36.8%, an overall increase of roughly, I guess it would be 10.1% over that period of time. That's a significant improvement for an individual municipality to make during that time period. I wanted to take a moment to also discuss the changes that we're proposing within the strategic asset management policy, as the framework itself has changed, I want to say fairly significantly between what we were using before and what we were using now. This slide here has been pared down a little bit since we initially put it together. There is another slide within the appendix that can show you within the overall topics discussed within the strategic asset management policy, what the changes were from our current policy to the proposed policy. I'll just be speaking to today in the interest of time. So on the left, we have the overall topics that are included within the policy. So I'll start at the beginning. The overall focus. The main message here is that the updated strategic asset management policy in terms of reference move Port Hope's asset management program from a functional, compliance-oriented framework to a mature corporate management approach. The earlier documents established the policy base and supported compliance within Ontario Regulation 58817. The updated documents still maintain that compliance focus, but place much more emphasis on integration, continual improvement, and organization-wide asset management practices. With regards to the governance model, one of the big changes here is daily governance clarity. In the early framework, council, the Asset Management Steering Committee, and the Asset Management Team were identified, but the structure less explicit. In the updated framework, responsibilities are more clearly organized across council, the Asset Management Steering Committee, the Asset Management Team co-chairs, and the Asset Management Team itself, as well as all staff. This gives the program a stronger accountability framework, which makes it easier to understand who's responsible for what. The organizational reach. The updated framework broadens participation. The earlier asset management team composition was narrower and reflected the structure at the time. The updated terms of reference brings a wider range of operational and corporate service areas, including engineering, water, wastewater, transportation, fire, IT, environmental remediation, parks, trails and waterfronts, recreation, and corporate facilities. This demonstrates that the asset management is increasingly being treated as a corporate practice rather than a siloed exercise. Asset management culture. The terms of reference the original term of reference focused on increasing awareness and reinforcing the relevance of asset management. The updated documents go further by explicitly stating the asset management team's responsibility for fostering and improving the culture of asset management, as well as all staff have a role in supporting that culture through their own work. This is not just about a committee meeting regularly, it's about embedding asset management into how we perform how the organization operates. I promise the remaining slides won't be as long as this one. Levels of service. The updated strategic asset management policy places stronger emphasis on levels of service as a central organized principle. The policy now states that the municipality's asset management goals and objectives are primarily defined in the terms of reference, and that realistic and financially sustainable service targets will be established and documented. The new terms of reference also assigns asset management members responsibility for defining levels of service, metrics, and targets. This is important because it helps connect asset decisions to the services council wants to deliver to the community. Risk and life cycle. The updated policy is more explicit about the risk-based decision-making and life cycle management. While these concepts were present before, the new strategic asset management policy clearly states that the municipality will apply recognized asset management principles and best practices, including life cycle management, risk-based decision-making, and continual improvement. It also adds principle language around balancing service, risk, and costs, with public safety as the priority. This strengthens the decision-making framework for prioritization. Data and condition information. Another notable change is the move towards clear data accountability. Previously, the AMT was generally expected to review and update asset management information. The updated terms of reference goes further, assigning ownership over asset data to the asset management team members for their respective service areas, with responsibility for regular upkeep, asset condition assessments, and maintenance management practices. This supports better evidence and for planning and prioritization. Annual review and improvement. The annual review process is stronger in the updated documents. The earlier SAMP required annual review of implementation progress. The new SAMP describes annual review as an integral part of the continuous improvement and specifically includes progress on implementing the asset management plan, consideration for the asset management policy improvements, and identification of factors affecting implementation and strategies to address them. The updated terms of reference is also add an ongoing annual asset management update to council. Integration with other plans. The updated strategic asset management plan strengthens the message that asset management doesn't happen in isolation. The earlier policy listed key municipal plans that need to be aligned with asset management planning. The new policy reflects that alignment, but presents it more broadly as integration with strategic planning, budgeting, long-term forecasting, growth and land use planning, risk management, emergency management, climate adaptation, and accessibility planning. This signals a more mature and embedded planning approach. Climate and resilience. Climate change was already part of the earlier policy, but the updated strategic asset management policy integrates it more fully into a broader resilience and sustainability lens. This policy continues to frame climate change as part of the municipality's risk management approach, including its effect on life cycle, maintenance, and disaster response and capital planning. The updated version also links mitigation more explicitly to the municipality's community climate action plan and reinforces environmental principles such as resilience, ecological protection, and the use of green infrastructure where appropriate. One of the ways that we want to start tracking our maturity in asset management over the course of our asset management journey is the use of the Asset Management Readiness Scale, which was produced by the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. This readiness scale essentially has 5 areas of not necessarily compliance, but readiness, starting with governance and direction, data and information, planning and processes, risk awareness, and financial alignment. Each of these individual areas has their own section broken down into 3 other areas, which we won't be touching on today. For the purpose of time, I've amalgamated them all into a single score. Each one of them is ranked 1 to 5. We'll be going through them one by one right now. The first one is policy and governance. This takes into account policies, strategies, and measurement. Our current score is 3 out of 5, which since the same time last year has increased by 0.7. The improvements and next step sections that you're reading on the slides here is direct verbiage out of this particular asset management readiness scale, and we'll be able to reference these improvements and next steps as we continue year over year. For this particular section, improvements aligns us, or the improvements we've made this year include we manage assets and services according with our asset management policy and organizational objectives. We've also begun to establish performance measures to monitor our asset management progress. Our next steps to continue improving in this area include establishing a roadmap that details actions for implementing our asset management strategy over the next 3 to 5 years, and using the performance measures to monitor asset management progress and outcomes. The next area of focus we're going to be discussing today is people and leadership. This takes into account teams, accountability, and resourcing. And I want to highlight 2 things here. One of them may be more obvious than the other. We haven't made any improvements in this area this year. The second thing is that this is actually our highest score already. We're already at a 4 or 5 in this area. The passing of the updated strategic asset management policy will put in place measures to help us achieve the upcoming next steps that will help us improve in this area. Asset management, so the next steps essentially would be asset management team measures and monitors progress, document changes to asset management roles and responsibilities as needed to support the evolving requirements of the municipality. Our current score here is 4 out of 5, and as I mentioned, we didn't improve or decrease during the last year. The next area we'll be touching on is data and information. This discusses asset data, performance, and financial information. Improvements we've made here year over year include we now communicate the results of asset management from levels of service. We communicate the results of asset management, we communicate the results of our levels of service measurement program to staff and council regularly. That comes in the form of asset management updates and this particular update today. The next, we have defined levels of service metrics for all service areas. Next steps include evaluate the life cycle investment requirements associated with critical assets and capturing major renewal and operating and maintenance expenditure data for assets. Our current score in this particular category is 2.6 out of 5, and we've increased by 0.3 year over year. The next area of focus is planning and decision making. This includes standardization, asset management plans, and financial planning. Year over year, our improvements include adapt our planning approach and criteria to align with involving organizational goals and objectives, and asset management plans for all service areas based on actual data. That was a significant effort, by the way. Next steps in this area include to employ a consistent structured asset management approach for all service areas, asset management plans based on both short and long-term issues and priorities, and then balanced based on risk. This particular area, we scored a 3 out of 5 and have increased 0.3 year over year. The last category we're going to be focusing on today is contribution to the asset management practice. This includes topics such as training, communication, and knowledge sharing. Improvements we've made year over year include staff and council are able to communicate the value of asset management in their own words, and we've disseminated asset management knowledge and resources within the organization. Next steps to improve include becoming thought leaders in the municipal asset management space, and that we're active in coaching other organizations to improve the overall body of asset management knowledge. Year over year, we've improved by 1 whole point in this area, and we are now at 3.6 out of 5. To briefly touch on some of the other areas of improvement we've made in the last year and a half to 2 years, it includes our asset management capital prioritization. We've implemented a multi-criteria decision model to help our senior leadership team better understand the importance and context around capital requests from municipal staff. This is reviewed on an annual basis by the asset management team, and we continually improve the process year over year to ensure that we're capturing all the nuances of capital planning. Another one would be the increased visibility of capital carry forward projects. This is something that we discussed during the budget kickoff, how we are categorizing our individual capital carry forwards to understand where the responsibility is, where the remaining work resides, to help us better understand department capability or to take on additional projects when they already have several projects in the queue. The next would be the development of asset management-driven 10-year forecasting. This would be our first year using this, and one of the key products that we purchased in the last few years was our asset management software, Citywide. There's particular reporting included within this software that make this process much easier than it would be normally. It essentially allows us to view each individual asset, its replacement cost, and the year that it needs to be replaced in. Ultimately, this focuses on data and data quality, but we've made significant improvements in that area as well. Lastly, being risk-based decision-making and asset prioritization. Another area that we've improved upon here is how we functionally categorize risk. We have created another multi-criteria decision model around strategic value of each asset. Each asset within our asset register has been categorized in this way. They each have their own strategic rank for which assets are technically, based on that model, the most important to the municipality. If you're interested in what that model looks like, I believe it's the last slide in the appendix. Lastly, I wanted to touch on a couple of things, a couple more interesting boots on the ground type initiatives that we're doing right now. Some examples of closing gaps within asset management. One of the asset networks that I've been touching on almost every year since I've been here is the stormwater network. The risk of failure within that particular network is high, and the consequences are also high. At the moment, it is currently managed through the roads department. Unfortunately, there's no current inspection program for those assets. That is based on the fact that staff time is not there for this particular asset set because it is managed through the roads department. There's no condition information available at the moment for these. We have done condition assessments on the assets in the past. That data is somewhere, and we're not entirely sure where yet. And also there are additional requirements for reporting through the updated CLI ECA, which I'm sure everyone knows stands for the Consolidated Linear Infrastructure Environmental Condition Approvals. Sure we all knew that. Upcoming adjustments that we're making to solve these issues is that the roads department has contracted the Municipal Water Solutions to complete operation and maintenance plans related to the updated CLI ECA requirements. They will be developing stormwater and operation manuals and staff training. This is going to be completed likely towards the end of 2026, October, November. Another area of concern or a gap within asset management that we've noticed recently is how many pooled assets we have within our asset register. A pooled asset is essentially a series of assets that is pooled to represent one asset within a replacement profile. Some of these assets are over $10 million. And what we're doing right now is we're working with individual departments to split out those assets, to determine, essentially what we had done is we've gone through with the departments, determined what those assets are, what the flow of the information needs to be, and splitting them out into logical frameworks so that we can not just say that in 2027 we have a $10 million asset we need to be replaced. We can break that down further into logical estimated useful lives, logical replacement costs, logical life cycle modeling. I believe that comes to the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this really thorough update. We really appreciate when you come and give us these updates, because this is some of the most important work that we do as a municipality. And maybe I'm just going to kick off with a couple of questions for you. One is, when you talked about one area of improvement, which is to become really good communicators internally within the organization and between our organization and others, the importance of asset management, I'm wondering, are we giving enough consideration on how we can best communicate asset management to the public, to the taxpayers? Because it strikes me that this is something that we're learning more and more about as a council and as a municipality, but how can we relay that in really simple, understandable terms to the public? And it sort of brings me back to one of your earlier slides where you were pointing out the decisions that we've made at this table to support reducing the infrastructure deficit for the municipality, and what that actually means in the bigger picture. Again, in language that's understandable to the public, so that they better understand some of the priorities that we're taking at this table, which may not seem immediate, but they are so important to that asset management and to the future well-being of the community.
Thank you for the question, and through you, Chair. I think this is a very difficult topic. I do think this asset management in general is a very complicated framework of financial planning. I do think that over the past year, we have made improvements as we were working with our communications team. We put together an AI podcast that basically took the asset management plan and put it into a 20-minute podcast that helped explain the decision-making progress, decisions that we've made going forward, or we're going to be making going forward. We've also, working with the communications team, we have created pamphlets and individual assets for online advertising that essentially give us that verbiage for the public that essentially kind of take what we're doing here on a daily basis and do our best to communicate it appropriately to the public. Does that answer your question?
It does, and of course I think we all very much appreciate all the effort that's been put into it, but I'm always still struck by the lack of those connection of the dots, and not understanding that those decisions that we made very conscientiously at the table around infrastructure are so important exactly for this work and the long-term nature of this work, which go beyond any one council, for the public to understand that. Questions, comments around the table? Councillor Clare.
Thank you. It was really, actually really nice to read all the progress that we're making, and kudos to you and your team on that. It's been great, and I think I appreciate you highlighting too the investments that have been made in trying to address that infrastructure gap, and I think that's a testament. Staff and council should be really proud of that work. I also really appreciate increased acknowledgement of the impacts of climate change and how that intersects with our asset management plan. So I want to say that from the outset, I really appreciate that, because I don't think it wasn't there, in those initial years to the same extent. I'm not sure that I feel like the policy language in the policy itself goes far enough for my liking on it. And I think I'm going to sort of channel Councillor Todd when we were talking about the EDI policy. I'd like to see more shall kind of language, directive language in the policy itself. I'm very conscious of, all of the volume of evidence that is there now about, I think, it's conclusive evidence that non-adaptive assets that are not considering climate adaptation end up costing us more over the long term. And so I'm curious about what we could do with the policy that sort of that addresses that, so that we're not going to still be in a situation where we get caught in that short-term thinking of comparing like for like versus climate adaptive design on the basis of that initial investment and not on the long-term cost of maintaining non-adaptive assets over the life cycle. And I know there was a huge report came out earlier this year, as you well know, that looked at nationally that suggested that investing in, climate adaptive assets at the outset will save nationally in Canada, up to $9 billion a year. And that 72% of that is borne by municipalities like ours. Like, it's not small change, it's huge, huge costs over the life cycle of these assets. So I'm putting on notice to the council, I'm probably going to bring forward a motion, depending on the nature of the discussion, to refer this to the Environmental Advisory Committee so that we can have an opportunity to review the language in detail and perhaps come forward with some recommendations around how we could incorporate more directive language around decision-making with respect to the climate impacts.
Can I address that? Okay.
Yeah, of course.
Through the chair. I believe that there is verbiage within the strategic asset management policy that does address this. And it requires that all staff making recommendations for capital infrastructure investment to take into account the community climate action plan. And we can more than happy to have it reviewed, I suppose. That is verbiage that we have within the policy as well as within our capital planning templates. It also needs to be recommended to the asset management team that the person bringing this project forward has taken into account the community climate action plan and how. I also would like to mention that natural asset management is very much in its infancy. Even as much headway as we've made within asset management planning itself is still a relatively early practice for a lot of small municipalities. Natural asset management is even more so. There has been a lot of headway in that area, but it almost seems as though many municipalities are waiting for somebody to build a best-in-practice solution so that they can take advantage of that. And right at the moment, there just isn't something out there right now. There are frameworks in place to value assets, value their replacement, but at the moment we're kind of short-staffed, so approaching that is a challenge.
Thank you for that. And I saw Councillor Less having his hand up.
I was just going to say that I think that the plan as presented, I think we should receive it for information. We're not going to get all the nuances of the climate action in there, but I think you should just proceed along the way you're going.
Any other comments, feedback, questions, et cetera, around the table on this? Okay, well, we do have a recommended motion that is on the agenda. And let's see if we've got a mover and seconder for that, and if there's an alternative motion that might want to be tabled around that. So let's start with what we've got on the agenda, and if we get a mover and seconder on that, we can open it up for discussion and see if there's an alternative language or option that we may want to include in that. Councillor Clare, I know that we had a response to your concern about whether or not the language goes far enough in the policy. Did you want to respond before we consider the motion? Why don't you maybe respond back to the response that you got to your question?
Yeah, I think I think procedurally, I would like the opportunity to introduce an alternative motion prior to consideration of the recommended motion. I didn't raise it because I wanted to give an opportunity for other members of council to ask questions and comment before I did it. But I did signal that I wanted to bring forward an alternative that is actually, it's not amending this, it's saying I think I would like to refer it to the EAC prior to consideration of approval of the policy.
Okay, and I wasn't certain if that was still your intent because I didn't hear you respond back to the response to your concerns. So I'll pivot back and ask you to put your motion on the table.
That report be referred to the Environmental Advisory Committee for further review and report back to council. Yeah, that works.
I have a question for you on this, Councillor Clare. How is this different than the language that's already in the document that requires that all decisions are made in relation to the climate policy that we have? What is it the environmental committee is going to do that the policy does not in terms of operationalization of the policy?
So I think what I would like to do is to have the opportunity to review the language in the policy itself. You know, when I read that section on page 7 with respect to climate change, I see a lot of language that is, these things must be considered. I don't see any directive language around they must be considered or how they're considered. You know, and there's still language in there that allows for, you know, we've considered it, but we're not going to make the investment in climate adaptive assets because of other financial considerations. And I'd like the opportunity to review that against the language in our community climate action plan before we adopt the policy, because I think the policy language itself is not actually fully aligned with the recommendations of the climate action plan in terms of, see what I mean? In terms of it being embedded as a thing that we will do as opposed to we will consider doing.
And I just want one piece of clarification on this, actually from staff, is it not the requirement, though, that before any decision is made in relation to asset management, that it has to be vetted through the community action plan? So in fact, before any subsequent decisions are made, they're in fact having to go through the same process that you're recommending here. I just don't want to double up or do redundant work here.
That is the case.
Councillor Clare.
There are other pieces there, you know, to the point I made as well is, you know, right now there is no provision that I've seen in any of the language that requires the like for like versus climate adaptive design comparison to include a life cycle forecasting of maintenance and repair. So we could end up in a situation where we're continuing to choose non-adaptive assets that are not going to perform as well over time because they may be cheaper at the outset. And I really just want to make sure that we have the time and the EAC, who are thinking about and researching these things as well all the time through that lens, have an opportunity to review it and consider whether there's an opportunity to strengthen that language before we adopt the policy.
Okay, so we have Councillor Clare's motion on. Let's just make sure that we all have a chance to. Could we bring that back up just to read it carefully? Oh, and I'm sorry. Before we actually go to a seconder, I've just noticed that Councillor Mink has her hand up. So, Councillor Mink, would you also like to just speak to this before I call for a seconder?
Thank you. Yes, I appreciate Clare's motion and her passion and knowledge for the the environmental committee. As well as the committee themselves. They sound, very engaged. But I'm just curious why or what the risk may be referring this to one committee when it could impact various committees, our asset management as it relates to accessibility, as it relates to the library board, as it relates to heritage and things like that. So I'm just concerned, are we skewing it a little bit by referring it only to the environmental committee, which is obviously a great group that's very strong, or like it just seems very focused to me on that one area, and I don't know.
Thank you for your comments, Councillor Mankin. I know what Councillor Clare is going to say on this. I think we should move on and try to decide how we're going to. Let's see if we can get a seconder on this. I'm sure your answer is that it's not skewed. It's a really important step. Or, okay, go ahead, Councillor Clare.
I actually want to bring us back to, I think it was 2 council cycles ago, where there had been a series of referrals where I had referred things to the Environmental Advisory Committee. One of them at least was also referred to the Accessibility Committee. You, I think, Mayor, made the comment, are we being inefficient here, and could those documents, bylaws, and that be circulated to our advisory committees as a matter of course before they come to council? And I think there was agreement from our CAO that that could be done. Maybe that was specific to bylaws and this is a policy. But to me, I think you're absolutely right, Councillor Mink. I think our advisory committees exist for a reason. They bring a lens that's not necessarily always embedded as directly in, in our staffing models and that. And I think that those lenses are important, and I think it does behoove us to have those lenses applied before we consider adoption of policies and bylaws.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that further comment. So we have, I think everybody's had a chance to read the motion that is been tabled by Councillor Clare. Is there somebody that would like to second this motion? Councillor Todd is going to second the motion. Any further comments or conversation on this? Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that I think staff have done an incredible job with this. I have full confidence in staff, and I don't think that we need to refer it over. I think our staff do an incredible job, and I know that they will continue to do an incredible job.
Okay, thank you to the Deputy Mayor. Anybody further? Okay, all in favor? Okay, that is defeated. So that brings us back to the original motion, that the recommended motion that is on the agenda. Can I get a mover and seconder for that? Moved by the Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Less. Any further conversation on this one? Okay, I'm going to take a vote then. All in favor? And that is passed. Thank you. At this point, we are going to take a 10-minute recess. Okay, thank you. We're going to reconvene with item 4.3, Report DS0926 re Port Hope Filming Office Operations 2026 to 2028. And at this point, I'm going to be turning the chair responsibility for tonight's meeting over to the Deputy Mayor, as I am suffering from significant jet lag, having just come back from being overseas yesterday, and so I'm going to turn over the chairing duties now to the Deputy Mayor.
Okay, so I'm going to ask staff to make the presentation, please.
Okay, so through the chair, this report, just very briefly, the intention is to give council a behind-the-scenes, no pun intended, understanding of Port Hope's film office activities. It's easy to forget that even when we are not permitting productions, and there's not a lot of visible productions, we are always working to improve our film readiness and competitiveness. The report provides a copy of our contractor SMRT Solutions Consulting's report and recommendations for policy and process improvements, which we plan to implement over the next 2 years, and there's a short outline of what that will look like. Some things to highlight is that filming remains a popular cultural phenomenon for Port and economic phenomenon for Port Hope residents and visitors, and businesses remain cautiously open to welcoming permitted productions if provided improvements are implemented and strong oversight and management are maintained. But the report itself is fairly comprehensive, and I welcome questions.
Wonderful, thank you. So I'm going to open up to council. Any questions or comments? Councillor Less.
Well, first of all, I'd like to commend the person or the people that wrote the report. It is probably the best consultant report I've ever seen in my life. And, you know, I went through it. I didn't go through all 91 pages, I must be honest. But on page 31, it identified that there was a lack of staff training. And then on page 52, it recommended the training that should be undertaken. And I think that, you know, sort of just filled it out very nicely. So excellent report, and I hope we can do everything that we said we can do in this report.
Through the chair, thank you, Councillor. It's important to note that the consultant's report is recommendations, and so staff are considering all of these recommendations as implementable. You know, as you might have noticed, there is a suggested schedule that is quite aggressive, and so the report should be the consultant's report should be considered as a consultant's recommendations only, not as actions that staff are committed to taking at this time.
Wonderful, thank you. Councillor Attridge.
Thanks, Meg. Yeah, it's great. The report's great, and so is the staff report. So thank you for all that. Recognizing that we haven't necessarily designated filming as a strategic economic driver, at what point does a report come forward, or how does that get in front of council at some point? So, and I recognize some of this is to pull that data so that you can bring that forward. Any ideas to when or how, and if you can fill in some details, I'd appreciate that.
Thank you, Councillor. Through the chair. Yes, the true economic impact of film permitting in Port Hope has yet to be determined. And part of the recommendations of the report, as you've noted, are to conduct a thorough economic analysis to determine whether investing further in film attraction would prove a sound and realistic investment that would generate appropriate economic activity to justify the investment. So that's to just summarize very quickly, this includes, you know, revenue generation for the municipality through film permit fees and leasing of municipal spaces, and revenue, of course, for businesses through leasing of parking and their own leasing of storefronts and sets. And then, of course, the economic spin-off of activity through film tourism and placemaking. We know that there is revenue and economic activity to be gained, but it remains to be seen just how much. And so in terms of operationalizing a study, that is one of, I would say, the first priorities of development services to while we are implementing improvements to our policy and our process, at the same time working with partners such as Ontario Creates at the Film Commission, such as Ontario Film, to find some support to hire a consultant to do a comprehensive economic impact study. Hope that.
So are you anticipating that's a next year thing, or not? I'm not going to hold you in. I'm just trying to get an understanding of what the horizon looks like.
Thank you for the question, Councillor, and through the chair. It would certainly be within the 2026 to 2028 operational plan to conduct that economic analysis, because before we would operationalize other recommendations of the report, we would want to better understand the economic impact of filming and whether or not council is supportive of continuing a certain level of investment in film readiness and growth for the municipality. That said, we wanted to keep things high level at this time, just to not consider future budgetary considerations with this report, but it would certainly be within the initial steps to undertake that analysis.
Mayor Hankivsky?
My question sort of builds on what Councillor Todd was asking and a little bit towards the answer here. So my question is, if we've got a number of potential directions that we could be taking around economic development, can we assume that the same kind of analysis will be made of all options in terms of that economic analysis of potential impact, so that we could look at a number of different options in terms of prioritization at the same time, not that we're looking at things one-off?
Thank you. Through the mayor to the chair, that's a great question, and certainly something that we can look at implementing, because I do think it is important to go back to our economic development strategic plan and already look at the what is being prioritized as action items within that strategic plan, and understanding where filming fits into this, and any further analysis into the economic impacts of filming would need to be considered comprehensively in relationship to the different sectors that the municipality is seeking to invest in, grow, maintain, support, etc.
Wonderful. Any more questions or comments from council? I'm seeing none. The recommended motion is to receive for information. If I can get a mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Attridge, seconded by Councillor Toms. All in favor? And that has been passed unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to 4.4, Report DS 1026, Economic Development Impact Report. And if I could ask staff to make the presentation, please.
Thank you, Chair. So this report is coming to you a bit late, given that 2025 is now 5 months behind us, going on 6. This report provides a high-level understanding of what the Economic Development Division achieved in 2025 to advance our strategic objectives as outlined in the 2023-2030 strategic plan. So very quickly, it is meant to be a snapshot. 2025 was a big year for Port Hope with the announcement from the provincial government that they would be exploring the Wesleyville site as a potential nuclear facility. We also completed phase 3 of downtown reconstruction, which was necessary, and transformative infrastructure that will benefit our historic downtown for decades. Meanwhile, economic uncertainty from geopolitical events and trade restrictions continues to impact the local economy. So a lot was going on in 2025. The economic development team and indeed all municipal staff have been working hard every day to leverage opportunities and mitigate disruptions, and we hope that that was captured in the economic impact report. Very briefly, we've seen, just to touch on some highlights that are also in that report, we have seen an uptick in activity of our online community profile, so close to tripling our year-over-year views of that. So this tells us that that businesses and investors are taking more notice of Port Hope and are increasingly looking for information about our community as a place to do business and invest. Economic development dispersed nearly $30,000 in matching downtown investment through the community improvement plan. That is a number that's lower than we'd like to see, and we're committed to increasing that. But yes, that's matching downtown investment that we see in maintaining our beautiful downtown through facade improvements, urban design studies, and tax increase relief. Speaking of the downtown, it was extremely lively last year despite it being a construction year. We saw the highest pedestrian count on record since recording began of pedestrian counts 10 years ago. So this, looking at the data, this was helped by some major events and celebrations, some peaks happening at Float Your Fanny Down the Ganney, Canada Day, City TV's Breakfast Television Town Takeover, which was a very fun, rousing success. The HBIA's Downtown Trick or Treat always brings tons of people downtown. The Candlelight Festival, and of course, our ever popular salmon season brings many people to the downtown. But I'd also be remiss not to mention the very active Capitol Theatre programming of 2025, which always brings lots of traffic. Sorry, I am losing my voice. I should mention that all this lovely impact was achieved despite economic development being seriously understaffed at various points in 2025. I won't dwell on it, but I say this because looking ahead, or more accurately looking now, at the growing team helmed by manager Julian Douglas and the numerous projects underway in 2026, which include focuses on clean energy and manufacturing, land development, tourism, filming, and entrepreneurship, I can personally say I have never been more confident in the municipality's ability to meet the moment we are in and see our community thrive.
Wonderful, thank you. I'm going to open it up to council for questions or comments. Mayor Hankivsky.
Thank you for persevering through your losing your voice. Really appreciate getting this report and seeing all the things that have been highlighted, which we often forget as we continue to move forward. It's good to have that retrospective and see all the important achievements that we've had, and I think some of the things that you've really underscored in terms of people coming into the community, the views that we're seeing online, etc. I'm wondering if, as a future thing, if it would be possible to actually be interfacing more directly with our local businesses, and not just the ones in the downtown area, but overall in Port Hope, to get a better sense of, are they growing? How much are they growing? Are all the efforts, for example, that are being put into some of the economic development initiatives, are those translating into growth numbers for those businesses in the community?
Thank you, Mayor, through the chair. That is exactly what's happening in 2026. The business retention and expansion program that was we've been working towards. I don't know how much I'm allowed to speak to it, Desta.
I can take over. Yes, so we do have something exciting on the cusp where we're looking to engage in a business retention and expansion program. Initially, this program was to focus on energy and manufacturing. However, upon further discussion with staff, we're opening this engagement up to all businesses across the municipality. There'll be more information to come, but what you're asking, Mayor, is exactly what we're looking to do right now, is engage with all business owners across the municipality, understanding their growth needs, their growth desires, what they need in order to grow within the municipality, so that we can answer those questions and identify gaps that exist across the municipality and better serve the business community.
Councillor Attridge.
Thank you. And maybe my question is going to fall into that, because I was looking at the economic development strategy, and it indicates that we have 142 farms across 29,000 acres generating 53 million in revenue, and flags a bunch of vulnerabilities, aging operators, labor shortages, gaps in succession plans. But agriculture is not listed as one of our 5 priorities, and it's getting about $500 a year. Is it going to get captured into that too? Like, are we working on something to better support the agricultural industry?
Thank you, Councillor Attridge, and through the chair. That's a great question. So what we are going to do now through this business retention and expansion is open up to all operating businesses. So that would touch on agricultural business as well. It's a really important question as it relates to business retention and expansion work, because it really, what we can do is something more broad, which is a broad engagement where we're reaching out and getting some basic information. But the next step is to go more sector specific and looking into, say, if we wanted to further deep dive into the agricultural sector and focus on the businesses in the agricultural sector, then that would be an opportunity for future years. That being said, we do continue to support the agricultural business community. Most recently, we had an agricultural business forum held at the Canton Community Hub, where we brought agricultural specific business owners together to discuss a number of important questions facing that their specific business community. And we'll continue to engage in efforts that will touch specifically on agricultural sector, but more broadly include them in this upcoming business retention program.
Thank you. I think that's great because I think the reports are great. The strategy is all. I think we're moving in the right direction, and I would like to see, as we go forward, more consideration from the municipality. How we can support the agricultural sector, especially because it is a primary economic driver for the municipality, and maybe some of that's going to be through official plan reviewing. When we do zoning bylaws, when we do policies, infrastructure budgets, maybe those are some of the other ways, but I know, they're going to need support as we move forward. It was identified actually in the forum that you mentioned, and I just want to make sure that we're capturing it. So I appreciate that it's on the radar.
Okay, any other comments or questions from council? Seeing none, the recommended motion is to receive for information. If I can get a mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Attridge, seconded by Councillor Halway-Wadwani. All in favor? And that has been passed. And thank you so much, and hopefully you can get home, get some rest, and get that voice back. Moving on to item 4.5, Report ES 0726, Health and Safety Water System Fund for Dorset Street West Standpipe Replacement Project. And I will ask staff if they have anything to speak to here.
Yes, thank you. I would like to provide a little bit of a background summary, if I may, for some additional context. So the ICIP grant was first applied for in 2021, and the transfer payment agreement for that grant was signed in 2022. And at that time, the total estimated cost of that project was $4 million. The design work, the transfer payment agreement was signed. The design work continued throughout 2023. The commodity prices that drive the cost of key construction materials such as steel, pipe, lumber, and concrete have significantly increased since 2021, with the pressure on lumber beginning in 2020. Because of the rising costs, we looked at switching the scope of the project to a standpipe on Highland Drive in 2024. The potential nuclear plant was announced in 2025, and since the standpipe alternative does not allow for growth, we've pivoted back to the elevated water tower. We're now seeking to enter into a transfer payment agreement for an elevated water tower with a total estimated cost at $17 million. It's also important to note that the standpipe, both the existing standpipe on Dorset West and the previously proposed standpipe, does not allow for any growth in Zone 1, which is essentially everything east of the river. We cannot grow in Zone 1 today. So this project really does do a lot to advance growth within the urban area of the municipality.
Thank you. I'm going to open this up to council now. Mayor Hankivsky.
Just going back in terms of that overview, if you can also just speak to the recent grant that was secured in relation to this project. And then I want to add something around the current ongoing conversations around addressing that shortfall that we still have in the overall budget.
Following the announcement of the nuclear power plant, that's when we started looking at growth within the urban area, and the standpipe does not allow for growth, which is why we made the decision to pivot back to an elevated tower and applied for the Health and Safety Water Systems Fund. At that time, when we applied for the grant, we were closer to $12 million, and the price has increased since that time to $17 million.
And we were successful in receiving a grant for?
Just over $7 million.
Okay, which was just announced recently. Okay, so the one thing I just wanted to add is, and as we've, I think, talked at this table, that there have been numerous meetings, letter writing conversations, follow-up chats on where that shortfall is, what the amount is of the current shortfall for this project, whose responsibility it is to actually cover the costs of that, given the fact that we could have gone with the alternative of the standpipe, and now, given growth pressures, that we need to be contemplating something other than that. And those conversations are still ongoing. They're challenging. They're not straightforward. But we are persisting with that because I, for one, don't think it should be on the tax levy for us to be taking on the cost of that growth that wouldn't otherwise perhaps be necessary, but for the Wesleyville potential growth that we may be seeing. I think there's a really good case to be made around the fact that we could have just taken a step towards a standpipe, but we need to be thinking about future growth, and that's going to require substantial amount of money. And so I just wanted to assure everybody that those conversations and those efforts continue. And in fact, just a week ago, the CIO prepared a very lengthy explanation of the background and trajectory of where we're at and why we're requesting additional funds from the province. I don't know if the CIO wanted to say anything further on that.
There's a lot of advocacy going off at all levels of government and to different ministries, cross-ministerial, hoping to do some delegations at the AMO conferences as well. We did have, when the mayor and deputy mayor and I met with the premier, we also had the conversation there too, so it's hit the highest levels. For clarification, it will be through, if we don't get this funding, it'll come through rates and development charges, not the levy per se, just a subtle.
You're undermining my advocacy efforts.
But that's all, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Mink?
Thank you. Yeah, the CAO just clarified that one question I had about where the funds were coming from. But just one question. This water tower, you said east of the Ganaraska. Am I correct to assume it's also north of the 401 and the future development that will go there, or is that something in the future still? And is there any plan for developing the water or more water under the 401 with this tower?
So through the chair, the elevated water tower will allow for growth north of the 401 as well as east of Hamilton Road.
Okay, perfect. Thanks.
But for clarity, the location is not north of the 401.
The location of the proposed elevated tank is on Croft Street.
Okay. Councillor Less.
Yeah, thank you for the answer from both the mayor and CAO about not wanting to impact the, not the tax levy, the water rates for citizens, which is already very, very high. And I appreciate your efforts.
Thank you. Councillor Attridge.
So I'm taking more of the doom gloom method, but if that fails, what would the impact on the water rates look like?
I'm looking at the Director of Finance, but I will say it would be heavily loaded more to development charges as opposed to water rates. So it would go through the development community. I don't think we've done that proportionate analysis of water rates versus, we haven't done the rate study. We are doing a rate study this year, which will build that in should we need to, but it would be development charge heavy as opposed to rates heavy.
Thank you. Mayor Hankivsky.
And just hot off the press, I've just received word that there is a new funding envelope that is going to be open in the coming days, and we will be applying for that. So let's hope that that means that there'll be some good news.
Thank you. Councillor Clare.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that I just confirm my understanding. So I think when I look at the budget, we're talking about the 5 million increase, but when I sort of read the breakdown of the previous plan that was approved in 2024 versus what you're asking us to approve now, the burden on the municipality has actually already been reduced slightly at the end of the day. So it's not an extra 5 million for the municipality. That's already been covered by this grant. So I appreciate all of the efforts to date. Let's keep knocking that down as much as possible, because it's still a lot, obviously, on the ratepayers. My question is picking up on, and I'm sorry, I was looking for confirmation. She nodded. So going to carry on. The question by Councillor Mink. So since we know that we're still looking at the urban boundary expansion options, awesome to hear that the new tower would support growth north of the 401, should that be where the urban boundary expands. Can you comment on our current capacity with the existing water tower and combination of this new water tower, and whether that would be supporting growth if growth was allocated instead to the west of the urban area?
So this water tower is for Zone 1, which is east of the river. There are 2 pressure zones in our water distribution system, and Zone 2 is everything west of the river. So this would only accommodate growth in the east side of the river. However, it does allow expansion north of the 401, as well as into our neighboring township.
Thank you. Do I see anything else from council? No. Okay, so the recommended motion is listed on the agenda. I just need a mover and a seconder for this, please. Moved by Councillor Les, seconded by Councillor Halway-Woodwani. All in favor? And that has been passed unanimously. Moving on to 4.6, report FES 0126, Municipality of Port Hope, Wildland Fire Management Plan. Does staff have anything that they would like to say to this?
Yes, thank you. So back in 2025, Port Hope Fire and Emergency Services secured funding through the Hydro One Energizing Life Community Grant Program to undertake the development of a comprehensive wildland fire management plan for the municipality. The project was completed in partnership with the Lumex Group in collaboration with various key stakeholders, including the Ganaraska Region Conservation Authority, the MNRF, Emergency Management Ontario, Northumberland County, and various other emergency service partners. The plan was developed in response to the increasing frequency, severity, and complexity of wildland fire events across Ontario and Canada, as well as growing risk associated with wildland-urban interface areas within our municipality. The plan provides a comprehensive assessment of wildfire hazards, response capabilities, firefighter safety considerations, training requirements, prevention strategies, and community risk reduction measures. The municipality of Port Hope is recognized as a leader in wildfire preparedness through the completion of this initiative. The plan is considered one of the most comprehensive municipal wildland fire management plans developed in our province, and establishing a leading-edge framework for wildfire prevention, mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery. It reflects best practices from across Canada while addressing the unique risks associated with the Ganaraska Forest, agricultural lands, critical infrastructure, and developing wildland-urban interface areas within Port Hope. Implementation of the plan will occur through a phased approach over the next coming years and will be integrated into departmental planning, training, public education events, emergency management initiatives, and future budget considerations. The completion of this plan represents a significant milestone in strengthening the community resilience and enhancing public and firefighter safety. Through the support of Hydro One's Energizing Life Community Grant, Port Hope has positioned itself at the forefront of municipal wildfire preparedness in Ontario and has established a long-term strategy to address emerging wildfire risks and protect residents, businesses, critical infrastructure, and our natural assets.
Awesome, thank you. I'm going to open this up to council now. Any comments or questions? I'm seeing none. That's our fire chief of the year. Oh, sorry, I see Councillor Mink there.
Thank you. Thank you. So I can't let this go away without commenting. I'm almost at a loss for words. I think that this is absolutely fantastic. I hear this all the time from people. I don't know whether it's just being in the rural area or whether it's GRCA or whatever my contacts are, but I continue to hear questions about what type of mitigation and plan do we have, particularly for the forest, but also farmland and so on. So thank you. I guess my question is, I looked through the report, very, very long, very comprehensive. Could you speak, what is the community plan? How do we get people involved? How do we make them know about this? Just on a very high level, what's the strategy to communicate this in a way that the community can comprehend it easily?
Sure, thank you for the question through the chair. Very high level, we're going to be looking at establishing a Fire Smart Committee within Municipality of Port Hope. So looking at participation through various stakeholders, community organizations to get together to identify, work within the body of the plan, utilizing Fire Smart principles, which is basically a wildland fire mitigation strategy that's utilized across Ontario and Canada, in conjunction with this committee, working together to prevent, mitigate, and educate public in relation to wildland fire safety.
Okay, great, thanks. And I guess my final words is that, as we see these examples around the world, we always think it can't happen to us, and then when it does, people look to the leaders in the municipality. How did it happen? So, I'm feeling very confident that we're in a good place, that we actually are addressing this ahead of time. So thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for those comments, and I couldn't agree more. I think that you've done an incredible job, which is the reason why you are the Fire Chief of the Year. The recommended motion is listed on the agenda. If I can get a mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Tom, seconded by Councillor Holloway-Woodwani. All in favor? And that has been passed unanimously. Moving on to Report 4.7, Report FIT 0926. Transition to prudent investor standard and one investment. And if I can just ask staff if you have anything for this report. Would you like to speak to it?
So Christine, our finance manager, was the report author. She can speak to it if you'd like an introduction, or I can just provide some highlights. So
just some highlights, yeah.
One, I want to say thank you to Christine, who's come back from maternity leave. As soon as she did, we jumped on this, and now she's finishing it short-staffed. As you can see, it is a very involved, process. Essentially, we need to do a few things. The majority of our money is, say, longer-term holdings. When you think about the two $10+ million funds, that's where the majority of our investments are at. We have additional reserve money, but it's also offset by some of the other areas where we have some shortfalls. So effectively what we're looking to do is to move all of our money within one investment. So one investment has some legal list type options for shorter term money. They also, where we would be moving our cemetery money, because it needs to be in that, it can't be in the second part I'm going to speak to, because it is still considered to be a trust. So we would have what I'll call generally shorter term money, and then our cemetery money within the one of, I believe, 5 funds that have been established by one investment. The other part of this, which is really the impetus for making the change, is that there's an exception to what we can currently invest in for municipalities working with a joint investment board, on an investment board. And for a municipality of our size, because we are not Ottawa or Toronto, there is a joint investment board that has been set up through one investment. And that, when you move to that, it opens up the opportunities, especially on the equities side, right? Which does mean some higher risk, some higher fees because there's more management involved. But with the idea that over the long term, that there is the potential certainly for higher returns. And since the majority of our money is in that area, that's why, the main impetus for looking to go and make that change. So that money would be moved in. Now, what happens when it goes to a joint investment board is, once council passes that, we'll go through a process, continue on a process to do that. But then that joint investment board makes the decisions, right? So we will provide them on a regular basis, what money we have that meets that criteria, and we would describe to them, say, we have $10 million in the rural LRW fund, and the idea is we're going to maintain the principal, we're going to take an annual draw to reduce taxation, and we want to, maximize our overall risk-adjusted returns. And then At that point, right, the investment board, they make the decisions about where that money is invested. But they are, frankly, much more suitable to do that than I am, because they are professionals, in that space. And through them, we can access, equity and other, types of investments. So that's the advantage. There is a provision, presumably so that people aren't in and out of these, type of scenarios as the market changes. And so, council makes the decision to go in. If I do need to make you aware, though, that if we were to, to want to leave, that would take an act from of the Lieutenant Governor, which would likely come through like a ministerial order, for us to be able to request. So it's not like we can, it's not like you or me who can, go down to our current bank and say, hey, we're gonna, I want to take all my money out and I'm going to go elsewhere and do that all, so. But I mean, we are committing to be part of a joint investment board, right? Our money is going to be pooled. As more people join, the fees for management come down, and there's other benefits as part of that. So I think I've hit most of the highlights. I'm looking to Christine if she, yeah. Go ahead, Mike.
Sorry, through you, Chair, if I could just add just briefly, the confidence in this board. I was originally a founding member at my last municipality of this board, started off with $300 million. It has now grown to $5.6 billion. So there's many municipalities getting on board. To the point of the restriction, you can always get your money out when you need it. If you have some unanticipated, it's not like, no, we can't touch it for many years. But to Director Baxter's point, it's professional investors that are doing it, and multiple communities have already got on board to the tune of $5.6 billion right now at this point in time.
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so if I may, so that's the general, setup. Certainly happy if there are any questions. Do you want to identify, I know this is, something that council wanted to move forward on. We want to be able, and there's still quite a process, following council's approval of this. So we have, essentially we've taken a very, I'll call it efficient approach to this. So there is quite a few documents that are all attached to this. Typically, just moving to the joint investment board is a phase, multi-report, council approach. We are doing it in one, as well as adding the general one investment, aspect to it as well. So this is the first time that's ever been done, but we wanted to go and move this forward, have the discussion. And also, quite frankly, if we're going to move our investments to have them all kind of in, in one spot, this is already going to add certain different elements, of complexity to it. It's going to mean more work on, on staff side, but hopefully, with the benefit of better returns. And as I'm talking through this, I will just point out, so this also updates our investment policy, which is great. And so one of the main determinants that we need to decide is, what gets invested with the joint investment board, and then what gets, how do we determine what is more shorter term? And they have a somewhat fancy name for that in terms of money not required immediately. So, under our policy, we are setting, if it's money that's going to be more than 2 years and we have that available as cash that's not needed elsewhere, that money would go with the joint investment board. And then, other money that we may have, on hand would be managed more through the one investment funds. And then there's some other, aspects. We're going to have to change some of our actual financial reports. There'll be some additional statements we'll have to do. How we go through that. We will do an annual update, which we do anyways. It'll just look a little bit differently. And as part of that, we also have to review our investment policy, right? For things like, we might want to move from 2 years to, money we don't need, from 3 years, or, we might have some sort of different reserves a few years from now. Our financial situation might change. So we'd go through that, and then we do a reconciliation, following that each year to move the money around. But I think that is all the highlights. I just want to thank Christine for all the work she has done on this. We're here for any questions and look forward to council's direction.
Wonderful, thank you. And I think those are great highlights too. So I'm going to open it up for council now. Councillor Attridge.
Yeah, thank you. I've got a couple of questions. One is, can you tell us what One Jib's actual historical returns for comparable municipalities have been compared to what we're currently earning? We'll start with that one.
So on the One Jib side, it's not necessarily a real comparator, right? Because now we have access to different, types of investments. So when we look, I keep looking at the one investment as two different parts because they aren't ever really merged. On considerable, on similar investments to what we would hold now, it fairly consistently, we've actually had, we've done well with our current investment advisor in terms of both fees and returns. When we've talked, I'm sorry, I had here somewhere, that has been typically between 3 to 5% is what we've kind of been earning at. Which, as I said, in terms of other legal list shorter ones, we've typically outperformed. If we look to the longer term, part, there's 11 different portfolios that the Joint Investment Board may put us in. So it's hard to kind of know from that spot where we would end up, which one we'd end up getting put into. The market's done quite well. So some of those municipalities, I know one of them had talked about over the past few years, having like a 6%, return. From looking at, because obviously we've talked a fair bit about our legacy, that's where the majority of our money is right now that we'll be investing. And I said, we've been advised when we start, one of our next parts, as I speak in the report, is about how we're going to then structure that in terms of what our practice will be for our annual draws for taxation. And we've been advised to essentially plan for 3%. That's a safe amount to pull out each year to make sure that you're maintaining your principal. So it is difficult to, understand exactly, what the comparison is going to be. But certainly over the long term, we should be earning more. How much more, I can't, tell you, but.
Okay, so maybe I'm a little confused then, so I appreciate the idea that we're sort of going all in, but what have we projected we're going to come out as? We must have done some sort of analysis to show that, hey, we're actually going to make, more money by going all in and doing this than what we're currently standing, and what do those numbers look like?
To the CAO there.
Yeah, can I just step in? Having through your chair to Councillor Todd, having gone through this, I came at the inception of it, and the returns we were seeing were, in the double digits in those returns. Keep in mind these are long-term investments. I did not like taking annual reports to council every year because these are long-term investments. These are not the short-term ones where the legal list comparator or the one investment legal list comparators are our current CIBC. These are long-term investments. I would say over my 5 years on being part of it, I would say the average returns were in the 7% range. That was a period of economic growth too, though. But keep in mind, and I'm doing that as anecdotal, not factual, but it is what we saw across the municipalities. It is definitely higher over the longer term than the legal list will be able to offer us, or the CIBC returns it will offer us in the low risk, low rate return products. So it should be, over the long term, substantially higher, because we're tapping into different markets, equity markets, global bond markets, global equity markets, which is something the legal list does not allow us to do right now at this point in time.
Oh, sorry, gosh. Yeah, so sorry, just to add to that. So the returns as of the last year, December 31st, 2025, as Mike sort of alluded to and as Dave alluded to, it depends on where you sort of sit and what portfolio they slot you in. That's based on, what we see our use for our long-term funds being and, sort of things like that, a multitude of factors. But they do have sort of, I think it's roughly 11 model portfolios. So Just to give you a bit of a gauge, I mean, their short-term model would be portfolio A that they have, which is zero investment in equities. So obviously you would expect a lower return. That 1-year return was 5%, as high as where, you know, they have some that are invested in 70% equities where they're seeing 16.8% return. So that's kind of where, like, we can answer you, but we can't answer you. Do you know what I mean? So it ranges from the 5 to 16, all of which are higher than we're currently seeing. The move, regardless of one JIB, regardless of the move to a prudent investor standard, opens the door to investment options that generally return higher than the others. With that comes more risk, naturally. But because we also are, you know, it's long-term funds, that helps sort of offset a bit of that risk as well, right? That it's not, if, you know, we see a 2% drop in 1 year, oh my goodness, how are we going to, you know, make it work? We don't need that money for another 10 years. So hopefully it's, you know, builds back up by then, right? Just naturally with the market. So it really, there's just so many factors in terms of what we will actually see. And it's also what the market's going to do in 26, right? Which we all know. We've seen some interesting dips over the last little while, dips and peaks.
Thank you. CAO?
And just one last comment, as Christine was alluding to, is there's many factors that go into it in the choice of the portfolio. So it also council can have, or we have a say on our risk tolerance. So if this council is very risk averse, you know, we may go into that portfolio A that doesn't have that exposure. I wouldn't recommend that because we're in it for the long haul, and that's where you get the diversification and you get the access to those higher returns that have higher, or those portfolio products that have higher returns over the long term. So, yeah, I would say a moderate risk tolerance for us. I've seen some municipalities have significant gains by taking higher risk and going into more active portfolios, and they've done well. But it's just a matter of the economy and the state of the world, I'll say. But we have choice, we have discretion to some degree on the input. The prudent investment, the One Joint Investment Board decides based on our risk tolerance how to invest.
Thank you. Councillor Attridge, are you good now? Yeah. Any other comments or questions? No, seeing none. Okay, so the recommended motion is listed on the agenda. If I can get a mover and a seconder for this, please. Councillor Less, seconded by Councillor Toms. Oh, and Councillor Clare, do you have? No, okay. Calling the vote, all in favor? And we may have lost Councillor, there she is. Councillor Mink? Okay, thank you. So that has been passed unanimously. Moving on to 4.8, report PRC 0826, naming request, Jeff Lees Memorial Kinsman Park. Does staff want to say anything to this report before?
Certainly, thank you. I'll speak very briefly. So this report does highlight and addresses the community request to consider a naming right for a memorial in a municipal park for a well-known community member, Jeff Lees, who passed away earlier this year. So staff received a letter of consideration and request from a group of community members. We've reviewed through the naming policy and was also supported by the Parks, Recreation and Culture Advisory. And staff have been collaborating with the community members and most notably the Lees family and have put forth the recommendation as outlined in the report.
Wonderful, thank you. So I'm going to open this up to council. Does council have any questions or comments? No, I have a few, but I'm just going to say one today. I'm going to thank our outstanding citizen, Peter Abrams, for coming, as Peter was a long-term member of the Kinsman, and this is the Kinsman Park, so being renamed the Jeff Lees Memorial Kinsman Park. So I thank you for your support for coming tonight, and I think at this point, well, the recommended motion is listed on the agenda. I'm going to ask for a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Toms, seconded by Councillor Clare. All in favor? I do not see Councillor Mink. There we go. Thank you. And then that has been passed unanimously, and I thank council for that. Moving on to 4.9, report WE 0326, Hawkins Road Limited Access Bylaw. Does staff have anything that they would like to speak to?
I would just add that this is, this proposed bylaw and agreement is a negotiated agreement between staff and the property owner to allow the development of a single-family home on a road that was previously closed after the flood in 1980 and has been closed for the last 45 years.
Thank you. Opening it up to council. Questions or comments? Seeing none, recommended motion on the agenda. If I can get a mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Clare, seconded by Councillor Mink. Or is that a question?
I will second it, but I did have a question.
Sure.
And a comment. So, you know, I know this has been a long time coming for this particular property owner, and it's been a challenge. I guess my question is just, do we know how many other properties are in this scenario? Do we have a process for handling it, or is it a case-by-case process? And the reason I ask is because it is very time-consuming and life-changing for some families to go through this process. So if we had an established process that could speed it up, it could really change some family situations. So I'm just asking that question.
Through the chair, this is, road allowances are dealt with on a case-by-case basis. We unfortunately don't have the resources to understand the condition and status of all the rural road allowances and urban road allowances as well.
Okay, yeah, and I understand that case by case, each one might be different, but having a standard sort of process to go through when these come up, just to maybe expedite it, is that even an option? Or I know they're each different, but there's different points to pass through to get to where they need to be. Is that a possibility?
Unfortunately, we've found a number of complex and unique situations for a number of these items.
Okay, all right, thank you. And I will second that, so.
Thank you. So it has been seconded then. So any other comments or questions from council? I am seeing none, so all in favor? And that is passed unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to item 5, notice of motions. We have no notice of motions tonight. Moving on to item 6, updates and new business. Pride Month. As we step into June, I want to take a moment to wish everyone a very happy Pride Month. This is a time for us to come together to celebrate the 2S LGBTQIA+ community. Pride Month is both a celebration and a reminder. It is a celebration of identity, diversity, and inclusion, but it also is a reaffirmation of our shared responsibility to build a community where everyone feels safe and everyone feels respected and everyone empowered to be themselves. Here in Port Hope, we are committed to that vision, and I encourage all of us to keep working together to ensure our community remains one where everyone truly belongs. National Indigenous History Month. June is also National Indigenous History Month in Canada. It is a time to recognize and celebrate the rich cultures, histories, traditions, and contributions of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people whose presence on this land stretches back since time immemorial and continues to shape our communities today. Here in Port Hope, this month is also an opportunity to reflect on our shared history and deepen our understanding of the lasting impacts of colonization. It is a time to listen, it is a time to learn, and it is a time to consider how we can each contribute to a future built on respect, relationship, and reconciliation. Walton Street sidewalk repair. Just a quick update for our residents about Walton Street. As part of our ongoing commitment to quality infrastructure, we'll be completing a small sidewalk repair related to previous reconstruction work on Walton Street. Starting June 15th, crews will be on site for about a week, only a week. We're not looking at a whole year. Weather permitting, of course, to replace a section of sidewalk that was damaged during the drying process to ensure it meets our standards. We know that this may cause some brief inconvenience, and we appreciate everyone's patience as we take the step to make it right. Thanks for your understanding as we continue to invest in safe, reliable streets for our community. As a downtown business owner, I'm telling you that it's going to be another minor disruption, as it will also be an incredible investment to get that looking nice. I actually don't even like walking on that side of the sidewalk right now. Do any members of council have any updates that they wish to share today? Councillor Attridge.
I would actually like to share that this Saturday I'll be participating in Dungeons, Dragons, and Dignity for All at the United Church. It is an opportunity where I get to play Dungeons and Dragons, and we're raising money for the Rose Quest. Doors open at the United Church at 5:30. Everyone's welcome. The fun in this is if you join, not only are you donating money to a great cause, but throughout the evening you can donate more money to have the different characters get into different trouble or get them out of trouble or shape their adventure. So if that's your thing, please come visit. And if you can't make it, you can certainly donate online.
Wonderful. Does council have any other council members have any updates? No, I do have one more. So typically I would have a different opportunity to do these updates. I'm just going to do this one now. So hey, Port Hope, we are swinging for the fences and you won't want to miss it. Join us this Sunday, June 7th at the Jack Burger Sports Complex for a home run of an afternoon, the Toronto Blue Jays watch party. So we're doing a Toronto Blue Jays watch party at the Jack Burger Sports Complex on a big screen. We have a 28-foot screen that we're going to be putting up, and we're going to be streaming it. But wait. We want you to be there for 1 o'clock. Actually, it would be nice if you were there closer to 12:30 and be ready and seated by 1 o'clock, because there is a special secret announcement happening. After that, stick around to cheer on the Jays as they take on the field at 1:37. A few more things, of course. Free popcorn, because baseball should always have snacks. Rock your Blue Jays gear, loud and proud. We also have our fire and emergency coming with inflatable obstacle course for the kids, maybe not just the kids. So make sure that you bring your friends, bring your family, and bring your team spirit. Let's fill the stands and make a grand slam of a day. At this point, I'm going to ask staff to leave for the evening before we begin question period. All right, moving on to question period. It is now time for question period. Remember, the purpose of question period is to make inquiries of council members related to matters of municipal business. Please note, this is not meant to be an avenue to ask questions of staff. If you have questions specifically for your council members, you can ask them now. Council is happy to speak to decisions, policies, and priorities, the why. I also want to highlight that if your question is operational in nature, the how, and then the when, they will best be answered by a member of staff following the meeting. Contact information for our senior leadership team is available by the door, and if you have any operational questions, please ensure you contact them. We ask that you please identify your name, and our staff will turn on the microphone for you. So if anyone from the members of the public would like to have any questions of council, please come up now.
Okay, Ed White, Mill Street. I actually, if possible, I've got 3 questions, and unbelievable to me, they're budget questions. And I'm terrible with the budget. Question 1, did we approve $200,000 for the dome, for the thing? Did we approve that? Okay, and did we get any assurances that the public was going to get equal times and whatnot on the tennis courts? Like, was there, I don't know what you talked about before this, but is there going to be adequate opportunity for people who just want to hack around? Is there going to be that? Did we get some kind of guarantee of that?
Mm-hmm.
How many hours a week?
Well, as you heard him say that they were talking about a minimum of 20 hours a week, but that is the very minimum. They're actually working on more. They are working on being able to have time slots almost all the time for members of the public. They were also speaking to the fact that during the summer, they will have time slots available for members of the public at a free rate. It's no cost. So they're still working on those things. Now, when it came to the financial contributions, we did just approve, but it'll still have to come to the council meeting.
Okay, thank you.
And I believe Councillor Clare would like to speak.
Yeah, I just want to repeat the explanation that the director provided too, though, that on the flip side, we're also going to experience a savings on what we actually expected to have to spend on maintenance and repair of the existing courts that's now being covered by this project.
Well, why are
and
we
the lease
responsible
agreement.
for maintenance on, like, why would the town be responsible for maintenance on the thing when we've, it's.
I'm talking about previously, so before the Dome project, right? The existing courts that were
Okay.
there. So
Okay.
in part, essentially the 200,000, as they were explaining, is kind of offset because we will experience that savings.
We
'cause
actually
that's now
spend
being transferred.
$200,000 on tennis courts, like through the Parks and Rec. Is that like total on all the tennis courts or just that one particular one?
Yeah, so I can speak to this a little bit. We just got finished talking about asset management and how important that is.
I got a
So-
question on asset management.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
So when it comes to the tennis courts, there's also the asset management, and as it has been identified, as well as the director talked about it earlier today, those tennis courts, which are a municipal asset, they were in bad condition. They were going to be needed to be done as well. So no matter what, I don't know if you'd been on the tennis courts recently, a giant crack basically all the way through it. So they were already at that point where in the next year or so, we would be having to address that through
Is
our
that the
asset
soil
management.
issue that they were talking about the increase, like the
No,
unstable soil or something?
Yeah, so that's compaction issues, okay? So that was something that the geotech could not identify from the surface geotech and through the boreholes that they drilled. So it wasn't until they actually dug down into it that they could find out the compaction levels. So then they had to make modifications, and as they were stating about it today, they were putting like concrete in there, basically to... The last thing you want to do is put in poles and it's not stable and everything collapses in, right?
Right,
So
okay.
I think that's probably the easiest way to explain it that way. Also, if you had noticed, part of the motion that we passed was also that the lease agreement is now being changed as well. So the lease agreement will be, after the first 2 years, there'll be a $10,000 a year lease agreement on there. And not saying that that is a cost recovery, but you can read between the lines there.
Okay, so now I'm going to ask a question on the report on investments.
Okay.
Okay, so all the way along the line, as far as I've been able to understand with the investment thing, all the different reports that they've given, we're doing okay with our investments. Okay, like every report I hear, when they do the budget reviews and all that kind of stuff, well, we're doing okay with the invest. We got stuff invested here, we got stuff invested there, it's paying off, everything's cool. Well, I'm kind of a, if it ain't broke, why fix it type of guy. And now you're saying you're going to throw everything all into one pot with a whole bunch of other people, given what's going on in the world at this point. And it's kind of like gambling, if you ask me. I know investments are gambling anyway, but if we're doing okay, why do we need to change?
Sure. If you're doing okay, why do you need to change? And sometimes there's also improvements, right? I believe the CAO had his hand up. Did you want to speak or no? Okay. Does anybody from council? Yeah, I thought I saw that hand up. I'll ask Councillor Holloway would want to.
So there was initially a resolution of council about, I want to say a year and a half ago, directing staff to look into the one investor option. because it was, and I think the wording of the resolution, the discussion at that time was that we didn't feel we were doing okay. That relative to what we could be earning, we were not happy with the returns we were seeing through our existing investments. So part of the direction to look into one investment was our interest in exploring whether one investment could provide better returns and be a better
who wasn't
investment.
happy?
Well,
The whole council?
Council, I believe, voted unanimously at that time to direct staff to look into one investment
Okay.
as an option to improve those returns.
All right.
Councillor Attridge. And
Like I
then
say, I don't know anything about budgets, so.
Yep, hold on one second.
And just to give another layer of that, because you're asking about the return. So what we were receiving before was, I think, somewhere between 3 and 5% is what we were sort of looking at best. And those were sort of like, low and slow, right? Like GICs and so on, those kinds of things. What we heard from staff and the reason why we switched over is this is going to diversify some of our investment portfolio, and they saw returns that were starting at 6 or 7% and going all the way up into double digits. And so as we diversify those funds, over the long term, we'll end up making more money than what we were doing before. So this will be a better investment opportunity for the municipality.
So correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm probably wrong, but as I understand it, they're taking it all, and there's several different pots that you can put it in this one group thing. So do you get to put your money in several different pots, or do you have to go in like one?
No, you can blend it across, is my understanding. And
So there's different things you can invest in.
So it gives us an opportunity to diversify a portfolio, similar to, I guess, the way in which, mutual funds, if Mike, I'm looking over to you, it's based on that same model. And so, you end up creating a blend of investments, some high risk, some medium risk, some low risk. And then when you blend it all out, you'll end up with a better return than what we were doing before, which is on more.
You lost me, right?
think of it this way.
It's simple. It's better for us.
It's better for us.
All right, I'll accept that. And I guess
hold on, Ed. I still have a response from Councillor Les. Thank you.
Okay, the easiest way for me to explain it, I don't think we were doing okay on our investments. I mean, we're getting 3.25%. And in the last 3-4 years, the Canadian equity market, so banks, Cameco, Canadian Natural Resources, have had a huge run-up. And we missed all that by not being able to invest in those.
So we got left behind.
We did.
Yeah, okay.
So basically, long story short, it's
too late now.
It's to be better.
Okay, if I may, one more question?
Yes, sure.
Okay, on the water, the asset management thing,
Are we talking about the
man who was talking here said that, and again, maybe I didn't hear this right, but he said the stormwater is managed by the roads department, but there's no inspections. I don't understand what that meant. Like, I know it's stormwater, so it's not like our drinking water, but how can there be no inspections? Isn't this kind of thing inspected all the time?
Okay. The CAO would like to chime in.
I'll weigh in on that. There's parts of the stormwater that aren't visible underground that need inspection. That takes time, resources, and money. It is a low-risk asset, I'll call it, because it is natural water that's flowing through there. It's not wastewater and things like that. So it becomes a budget item, like how much. The more inspection we do, the lower our asset management in the future are going to cost, because we can do the preventative maintenance ahead of time. So yes, we are working towards that plan of asset management of the stormwater system. We're not there yet. We do basic stormwater management systems and visuals that we can see, but the underground linear assets are much more challenging.
So this has got to do with flooding and stuff like that in major storms and things like that?
Essentially, yes.
For stormwater, yeah. And so basically, overall, what the report is trying to tell us is that there are areas of improvement, and that's the whole point of it, is to identify what those areas of improvement are and then start working on them to improve them.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ed. Any other members of public for question period? And I see none, so I'm going to conclude our question period now. And at this moment, I am in a position to adjourn this meeting. Thank you, everyone.